The Dawdler's Philosophy.
Snippets.
Just a taste.
Another little favorite paper of mine, I don't know how well this one is distributed, and how people think about it or not, but there's a paper called Persistence Solves Fermi Paradox but Challenges SETI Projects. And that's just the title. I don't want to get into the deep depths of it in particular. More in math, and I don't care how it challenges SETI projects at the moment. But what it was essentially, I guess it might be time for a quote. It's by this Brazilian guy, Osame Canucci. I don't know how else you say his name. Maybe it's Kanoki. I have no idea. You ready?
Oh, I'm always ready for quotes.
I know you are. But I love asking anyway. So this is the premise that this guy comes up with. He says,
Suppose that you're a member of a lost Amazonian tribe that's never been contacted. Now, it is obvious that a technological civilization able to perform travel by air at 1,000 kilometers an hour certainly had time to colonize the entire globe. But since they have not reached you,
you being a member of the lost Amazonian tribe,
should you conclude that there is no such global civilization? A nice view of the global civilization is given by the nocturnal Earth observed from space. It is clear from this view not only the perverse distribution of global wealth, but also the fact that the distribution of technological human colonies, commonly called cities, is highly non-uniform. Huge areas are not inhabited and even never visited, or visited sporadically only by fanatic explorers. But despite the provincial worldview of lost tribes, the global civilization is there.
I think his point is to try and say that it might not be a simple and uniform diffusion process as assumed by the Fermi calculations. Like it could be that, kind of harking to the silly joke about, well, aliens want to go to the desert Southwest. They don't want to go to your podunk town in the middle of northern Minnesota. Like it's like, it's this it's maybe it also has something to do with complexity theory, where it's like one person puts up a flower shop and then it's like, well, I have a flower shop I'm going to start. Where should I put that? I'll put it across the street, like, and before you know it, you got this clustering and you have a flower district or something like that. Again, that may just be unique to us. But still, I think that was the whole point that this person was attempting to put out there, that there could be that there's other ways to think about these problems rather than just simply saying, well, let's stick to our guns and say it's a diffusion process. Where the fuck are they? It's instead there could be other things going on, and there could be other approaches to this whole idea of how to spread out through a galaxy or whatever. And we might just be missed on a regular, consistent basis. And not only that, and this was something I don't know, I'm pretty sure I did not make this up. I'm sure I read it somewhere. I thought I read it in this paper that I just read from, but I couldn't find it. But the idea that, like, if you are just somebody who's in a tribe or whatever, right? And you look up at the sky and you see contrails from planes flying overhead, because they're crisscrossing all over the globe. You might not realize that that's, a global civilization around you flying around, and, people are doing all this stuff. You're just in your little spot in the jungle and you look up and there's this weird straight cloud, but you don't maybe this is all assuming that somehow if you're in some lost tribe that you really don't know that there's a whole world out there. But if that was the case and you look up and you don't know what you're looking at or what to look for, then it's possible that there's a civilization out there. If you somehow had the wherewithal to ask the question. But that's kind of what I was thinking, that this sort of kind of asks. And it's sort of like ant trails rather than, flight paths, not diffusion across an entire space. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Which it obviously would be, at least physiologically, right? It's not like nobody thinks that, well, I suppose, I mean, but that gets even farther out there. But most people wouldn't think that most of the time, whatever alien civilization were doing interstellar travel, that they wouldn't literally physically be spreading and diffusing across the entirety of space. But what they might be doing is that their sensors would be taking readings out across, so that their epistemic reach would be maximally diffusive, even though their anatomy weren't stretching across all of space. But that might be nonsense. I like the tribes thing. I think it's a good addition to the conversation. It brings up a lot of useful points, including some of the standard ones, like, well, somebody's got to be first, or whatever. Maybe the explanation for us not having encountered another intelligent species is not because there couldn't be one or won't be one, but we are the lucky ones, or the unlucky ones, and happen to be the most advanced civilization currently in the universe. It seems highly unlikely, but somebody's got to be it. Another one is, like, the Lost Tribe, like you were saying, potentially has access to evidence of the global civilization, but they don't know how to interpret the signals as indicating a global civilization. They just think they can watch the finger of God draw white lines across the sky, but they don't realize what it indicates. So perhaps some segment of what we call UFO evidence, or any sky-gazing phenomenon, maybe we have seen the evidence of the extraterrestrial intelligences, but we didn't know how to interpret it and correctly attribute it.
Well, one thing, though, is that, there's a lot of stars out there. And so it's quite possible that even still, like, you wouldn't be, even though, you're not physiologically spreading yourselves by diffusion across a galaxy or something like that, you might still not be looking in particular areas because it's just too out of the periphery of where you do tend to look. I mean, say there were multiple, I don't know, civilizations out there or something. I think the likelihood of them talking to each other or listening to each other is much greater than catching some weak signal from us. But that isn't to say that there isn't things that rink-a-dink alien intelligences or whatever aren't able to, come up with. But it's just the idea of trying to explain, I guess, the great silence or whatever it is it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just the notion that, well, on the one hand, we don't know what we're looking for if it is out there potentially. And on the other hand, they may not be listening anyway because we don't attract attention by any standard. And so that's the other possibility that that this author in particular, I think, is trying to get across.
Yeah, there's just so many.
We're third world species or something is the kind of, or whatever, third world civilization, not a first world,
So that perhaps a more advanced civilization would, number one, not actively be seeking us because we're uninteresting and primitive. They may have discovered us and either ignored us or actively wiped it off. Like, who knows? Maybe aliens showed up here, but they've got little men in black flashers and they changed the memories of everyone on Earth. We'll never... As soon as you start considering, in my opinion, these kind of sci-fi far-out scenarios, you have to admit of anything that you can think of as a possibility, plus realize there's a significant number of things that you will not be able to think of, but that are also possible.
Right.
One thing that I would say as a kind of contra, the primitive lost tribe example, is I wonder when that was written, and I wonder if how much it works, because I don't know, in 2018, are there any left? If so, in 2050, will there be? I'm pretty sure we're eventually going to exhaust the untrammeled tribes on the surface of Earth. And so if we really want to make that analogous, it also seems to be saying, well, we either should have already run into them or will soon, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the idea, that it might eventually, it might just take some time, but eventually some lost group on an island might eventually be encountered or whatever. Yeah, but at the same time, if we want to explain what, that's why I think he was saying persistence solves it. So that over time, eventually you do get spotted, but right now they just don't know, they don't care, don't know, or whatever. Like they're just, whatever, we're just in the backwoods doing our thing, not really attracting any attention.
Yeah. I don't, again, this is all when this kind of far-flung speculation, who knows about any of it, but it just seems to me, maybe for good reasons, maybe not, I'd have to think more about it to have a good argument. But in the case of the 1971 jet airliner flying over South America or something and passing unknowingly above one of these tribes, they can see the contrail, but the plane can't see them. It seems to me like that's not likely to be very tightly analogous to the transgalactic alien species cruising across the Milky Way and passing through the solar system. I think by the time one's technology reaches that level, it seems to me highly intuitively likely that their scanning powers, or what, like if you're doing that, you're probably purposefully paying attention to everything around you, and you probably have really good ability to do so. The United Airlines flight that's not their purpose or interest. They are not the Starship Enterprise, whose mission is to discover unknown civilization. They're just trying to get people from point A to point B. But that the alien explorers, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they were actively doing, is scanning the forest below to try to find all the tribes, and that they would probably find us. Just to try again to stress that I have some complaints with the analogy. That makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a huge no. I think those are two possibilities. One that their level of technology is great enough. Some galactic Type 3 civilization or something. It's great enough to catch all the signals, or to be able to work out the signals from the noise. And the other one being that, guess maybe they do still have that power, but they can't catch everything all at the same time. It's just you receive one signal at a time. And so our signal just hasn't been received yet or something. That kind of thing, I think, is what they're trying to say.
Right. Another thing that I can't appreciate, and I don't know if even the professionals can really appreciate it, is just how far things are apart out there.
Yeah.
And maybe that itself is the resolution to the Fermi paradox. Well, it seems paradoxical to your stupid chimpy intuitions, but you just don't understand how big these numbers are. And your chimp can't grok it, so there's really no mystery here. It's just that things are far apart. So maybe there are a bunch of aliens, and the only reason that you haven't run into them yet is that nobody has run into each other yet, because space is big.